How you doing? I'm Big D. Welcome to the show. This show is going to be talking about silver and the military as well. What the military uses silver for. Little disclaimer before we get going. The content in this video is for educational purposes only and represents my personal opinion and market analysis. It should not be considered professional financial investment advice. Financial markets, including silver and precious metals, are volatile and subject to significant risks. The scenario describes involved a mix of historical facts, current market mechanics, and simulated future events based on present trends. Now, you should always conduct your own due diligence and consult with a certified financial planner or advisor. Making the investment decision would definitely help if you have an advisor. But going forward, these are just details that I have found. Nothing has been 100% confirmed. It's not like the White House has come out and said, this is what's going on. All right, so let's move on. This is very informative, my opinion, but I think you definitely need to stick around to see what I have to say on this one. Now, understanding missiles in the military, they use a lot of silver. And with many of these shortfalls, with the COMAX, the LBMA, Shanghai, etc., this should be something that is more reality than fake news. Now, some of the missiles in the arsenal of the U.S. military can strike targets at 1,000 miles away with surgical precision. In the tip, which looks like a spear, of one of the most hard to defend missiles in the world history. Now, when you look at this missile, you see steel. You see you're understanding that there is explosives in it. You see jet fuel to propel it, but you are missing the most important components inside the guidance system. There's wiring, specialized batteries that are roughly 15 kilograms of pure silver. That is roughly 500 ounces of silver. At a current price, depends on where you purchase it. I'm sure the military gets a deal. It could be up to $40,000 for that amount of silver. That puts the price of the missile about $2 million. It seems like a rounding error, but here is the catch. Without that 500 ounces of silver, the missile does not fly. Without the silver, the guidance system goes blind. Without the silver, the battery fails to start the engine. Silver is not just money. It is not just jewelry. It's a strategic weapon. For the last 80 years, the United States has fought wars based on the assumption that we have infinite materials. We assume we could always build more ships. We could always build more planes. And missiles are no big deal. Just build many of those too, right? But today, we're waking up to terrifying reality. The United States government has sold its entire strategic stockpile of silver. We have 0 ounces left in the national defense stockpile. And we are currently engaged in a global arms race with nations that have been hoarding silver for decades. In this fourth part of an investigation, I have found that with my research, we are going to expose the Pentagon silver crisis. We're going to show you official government documents. Well, I can't show you, but I'm going to talk about them. Modern warfare. Using satellites to torpedoes is impossible. Massive use of silver. The Department of Defense realizes they can't buy metal on the open market. They won't bid for it. They will seize it. This is the story of national security versus portfolio. Now, to understand the crisis, you have to understand the physics. Why does the military love silver? Why don't they use copper or aluminum? Because silver is the best conductor of electricity and heat in the known universe. In a consumer toaster, copper is fine. If the toaster gets a little hot or if the signal is a little fuzzy, nobody dies. But on a fighter jet, flying at Mach 2 or in a satellite orbit, in the vacuum of space, failure is not an option. You need a path of least resistance for the electrons. You need a metal that doesn't spark, a metal that doesn't corrode, a metal that creates the most reliable contact possible. That metal is silver. Let's look at the inventory of modern army. Silver zinc batteries. These are used in torpedoes and drones. They have a massive power to weight ratio. They are safer than lithium ion, but they require huge amounts of silver plates and bearings. The ball bearings in the jet engine are often electroplated with silver. But why? Because silver is the most solid lubricant. If the oil system fails, the silver coating prevents the engine from seizing up in mid-flight. Satellites. Every solar panel on a military satellite uses silver. Every connector uses silver. Radios, the entire communication grid relies on silver coating RF connectors. The Defense of Logistics Agency clarifies silver as a strategic mineral for a reason. You cannot run a 21st century military on 19th century metal. The more advanced our weapons become, the more silver they consume. World War II tanks use very little silver. A modern Abrams tank is a computer on a track. It is full of silver. We have digitized warfare, and by digitizing it, we have tethered our nation's security to the supply of precious metals. So if silver is so critical, surely the United States keeps a massive stockpile. Surely where they're probably under a mountain like in Colorado, there are billions of ounces waiting for war. Once upon a time, that might be true. In 1940s and 50s, the United States held the largest stockpile of silver in human history. We held over 3 billion ounces. It was a strategic asset. We used it for coinage, but we also accept it for the Manhattan Project. But then we got arrogant. In the 1960s, we removed silver from our coins. 64 to be exact. The government looked at the 3 billion ounces and said, we don't need this anymore. Money is digital. War is nuclear. Silver is a relic. So they started selling. For 30 years, the United States government dumped silver onto the market. They held auctions. They used it to mint commemorative coins. They effectively subsidized the low price of silver to flood the world with American inheritance. By early 2002, the Defense of Logistics Agency reported that the national defense stockpile of silver was effectively zero. They sold the bars. They closed the vault. Today, the United States government owns virtually no silver. I believe that is going to change. There is some research that's coming out. I could not confirm it before I started this show, but just so you know, I'm looking into it. Now, they believed that the U.S. Mint needs to make silver eagles over military use, and then the open market and buy blanks from private refineries. When Ratham needs silver for their missiles, they have to buy it from a commercial bank. We went from being the Saudi Arabia of silver to being a beggar who, like at the street corner. We have zero buffer. If war starts today and the supply lines from Mexico and Peru are cut, the factory lines at Lockheed Martin stop. This brings us to a logistics model. For the last 30 years, the Pentagon adopted the corporate strategy of this in time, hopefully, for delivery. They assumed that the global market would always function. They assumed that if they needed silver, they could just issue a purchase order and it would arrive in 2 days. This works in peacetime. It works when trade routes are open and prices are stable. But it falls catastrophically in a resource war. We are now seeing cracks in the system. As we discussed in the Samsung video that I had the other day, the commercial sector is sucking up all the available silver. The float is gone. So now, when a defensive contractor tries to buy silver, they're competing with Apple, Samsung, Tesla. But the defensive contractors move slow. They have government bureaucracy. They have fixed contracts. If the price of silver doubles, the contractors lose money on the missile. So they delay buying. They wait for the price to drop, but the price isn't dropping. So the inventory dries up. We're hearing reports of lead times from the military grade silver componentry stretching from weeks to months. We are seeing delays in delivery of key weapon systems. But why? Supply chain issues. Translation, we cannot get the metal. We have built a military machine that assumes infinite supply. But we are operating in a world of finite scarcity. Just in time for military is about to become the too late military. Now look at our adversaries. Look at China. While the United States was selling its 3 billion ounces, what was China doing? They were buying. China has been aggressively accumulating gold and silver for the last 20 years. They have encouraged their citizens to own it. They have built massive state refineries. They have banned the export of raw silver ore. China understands that silver is a strategic metal. They know that in a conflict, the first thing that happens in a blockade is a blockade. If you control the physical metal inside the borders, you can keep building missiles and satellites. If you rely on the open market and the market closes, you are defenseless. This creates a terrifying situation. China has a war chest of physical silver. The United States has a paper promise from JP Morgan. And if you go back and watch my JP Morgan show, you'll see what they're hoarding, and it's huge amounts of silver. Now, if the COMEX defaults, the paper market breaks, China still has the metal to build weapons. The United States has a lawsuit against the bankrupt bank. This is the National Security Agency that is not being discussed in Congress. They are talking about budgets. They're talking about software. They're not talking about the atoms required to execute the strategy. So the stockpile is gone. The demand is rising. The enemy is hoarding. What does the United States government do? They panic. In part 2, we are going to look at the government response. We are going to analyze Executive Order 140 Pentine, Americans' supply chain. This is the document where the White House finally admitted that our dependence on foreign metals is a threat to the national security. I'm going to explain the Defense Production Act and how it allows the president to force companies to sell silver to the military before they sell it to you. And we are going to look at the potential for a strategic silver reserve to be rebuilt, which would require buying hundreds of millions of ounces from a market that has none to spare. The Pentagon is waking up, and when the elephant wakes up in a small room, everyone else gets crushed. Stay tuned, because I'm going to have some future shows on this, and you're going to need to know, because if you own silver, you really should know this information. It's a crazy world we live in. But the reality is, if we are truly out of silver, as far as our own government, and they have to compete with companies like Tesla, Samsung, etc., I think we're in a lot of trouble. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment in the comment section. Try to have a great holiday without thinking about what could possibly happen to America.